Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the City of Warrenville City Council regular meeting for Monday, March 5th, 2018. May I have a roll call, please?
Alderman Ashour.
Here.
Alderman Berry.
Here.
And Bevere is excused. Alderman Davalos.
Here.
Alderman Goodman.
Here.
Alderman Hoffman.
Here.
Alderman Widener.
Here.
Alderman Wilson.
Here.
Thank you, Emily. Would you please stand as you're able and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Every once in a while, we get some exceptional volunteers for the community. Actually, we get them a lot, but some are very exceptional in that they do something that's above and beyond anything that we might expect. For the past 5 years, Keith and Deborah Swindon have done our community calendar, and I think anyone who has got a copy of that would have to say it has been exemplary. The photography, the production has just been superb. They are moving on to other things. So we'd like to officially, on behalf of the community, say thanks tonight. So Keith and Deborah, please come up. I have a proclamation, or a certificate of appreciation, which is just as good, maybe even better than a proclamation. Acknowledging Keith and Deborah Swindon for valuable volunteer service to the city and citizens of Warrenville, for coordinating the production of the City of Warrenville Community Calendar. Thank you for your exemplary service and dedication for the past 5 years. Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you.
Please say a few words.
We don't have much to say except we just really enjoyed doing it, and it was a tough decision to stop, but we do have other things to do. So thank you very much for acknowledging this.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're just looking for some other ways to give back to the city. So once again, thank you.
All right, we're going to hold you to that.
We're in this together.
Okay, this is the part of the meeting that we set aside for citizens' comments. We have one person signed up this evening, Mr. Bob Siebert.
Bob Siebert, Albright Court. On February 8th, there was a public hearing by Covington Realty Partners for apartments near Regal 13 Theaters. The petitioner stated they were there because the city of Warrenville wanted apartments at this piece of property. They were also there, they stated that they needed numerous variances because the Regal 13 Theater would only sell them a certain quantity of property. So what is occurring here is that a size 8 foot is being placed into a size 4 shoe. But what about the economic history of this sector of Cantera? Max and Irma's was there in the beginning. It left. Eddie Marlowe's came in, raised the roof, and put in a significant investment. Stir Fry was there. They left. It was replaced by Twin Peaks. Then out of the parking lot came Chewy's, a restaurant. Main Event replaced half of the original AMC 30 theaters. The city states supposedly there will be in this area a potential new office building. So we can see that there has been strong economic activity in this particular sector of Canterra, a highly prestigious area where as one individual entity moves out, another one is willing to move in the business classification. By downzoning to residential, the city will increase its operating costs and decrease its potential business revenue. This is not the objective of TIF 1. To obtain that objective, the citizens spent over $57 million to the developer to ensure that we would have the business and office classifications. So to get the right size, because of this tremendous amount of variances, perhaps the city should hire a shoemaker to ensure that we have the proper size development.
Thank you, Bob. We will move on to official and staff comments, beginning with the mayor. We're going to have a special presentation this evening, and we'll begin with that. A little bit of background. On January 15th of this year, the City Council adopted a revised harassment and discrimination policy as required by Illinois Public Act 100-0554. The City Council reaffirmed its commitment to provide an environment free from all forms of harassment and discrimination, and an environment that promotes inclusion and respect. As part of that ongoing commitment, we have requested training be conducted this evening for the elected officials as a proactive measure, because it's important for the City Council to lead by example. Phil Schreiber of Holland and Knight has joined us this evening and will conduct the training. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you. So, again, my name is Phil Schreiber. I'm a partner in the labor and employment practice at Holland and Knight. And I wanted to talk to you about really inclusion and respect. I mean, that's what the purpose of harassment training is. And today we're going to talk about why we train, remind you of the city's policy, and then talk about preventing and correcting unlawful conduct. And I'm going to go pretty quickly through this, so please, if you have questions, we can ask them at the end. But why do we train? So this is an opportunity for the city to take a look at its workplace culture. In particular, this is an opportunity to focus on engaging in behaviors to make the city a welcoming and inclusive place for all individuals. Sexual harassment, as most of us know, has been very high profile lately. Just watched the Academy Awards last night. It's pretty prevalent on everyone's mind there. And it's prevalent throughout our culture today. It's on, a lot of people are talking about it. So it's important that everyone understands these issues and understand that sexual harassment by its very nature is antithetical to a welcoming and inclusive work environment. It is important that all stakeholders get on the same page on these critical issues. And as public officials, none of you are immune to the challenges of sexual harassment. Your interactions with members of the city staff, other officials, vendors of the city, and members of the public are subject to scrutiny. Even if those interactions fall below the legal definition of sexual harassment or unlawful harassment, they still may create the appearance of impropriety. And the appearance of impropriety, again, is antithetical to the idea of inclusion. So a recent example that many of you may be aware of is State Senator Ira Silverstein. So the Inspector General found no basis to suggest that Silverstein actually engaged in sexual harassment of a bill proponent, but the review of the Facebook Messenger text and other evidence show that Silverstein did not maintain an appropriate professional distance from the proponent of the bill. he was sponsoring. Even though his accuser appeared to encourage and enjoy these sort of exchanges that were certainly flirtatious in nature and appeared to regard Silverstein as a friend, the conclusion of the Inspector General was that Silverstein should have been much more cautious and conscientious about engaging in these types of teasing and flirtatious communications with someone he knew was depending on him to advance legislation. So the moral of this story is that even though Silverstein didn't actually engage in what might be viewed as sexual harassment, his conduct harmed the public's trust in the General Assembly. And the appearance of him being enamored with a bill proponent and that he may have used his office to advance or impede legislation as a result of that fixation or feelings is problematic and warranted the finding of unbecoming conduct. So the point is, as public officials, you need to be aware of even innocent types of flirtations and exchanges can impute or call into question your credibility and your motives. So the city's policy, as the mayor just mentioned, the policy's been updated, and the policy really is comprehensive. And in its detail, and addresses the topics of harassment and discrimination in a very comprehensive manner. It's comprehensive in terms of the type of conduct that is prohibited, as well as to whom the policy covers, both in terms of who is protected by the policy and to whom the expectations apply, and that includes public officials, appointed officials, and so forth. So I want to talk briefly about improper conduct versus illegal conduct. Illegal conduct has a pretty high bar. I mean, the courts have set a pretty high standard of what constitutes unlawful sexual harassment. But that doesn't mean that the city's policy is at that bare minimum. The city's policy is well above that, and it should be, because the city is committed to maintaining a culture of inclusion and respect. So the focus shouldn't be on the legal threshold of what constitutes unlawful harassment, but really the goal is focusing on a culture and creating a culture and an environment that is based on inclusion and respect, and therefore your policy far exceeds these minimum standards set by the law. It's good to review just who could be a harasser and who could be a victim. So this rather simplistic set of graphics, because my PowerPoint prowess is limited, but it gets the point across. I mean, obviously male to female, female to male, but let's not lose track of the fact that coworker to coworker, employee to official or outside party, and vice versa, and including official to official. These are all situations where harassment can exist. Also keep in mind that a sexual desire is not required for there to be a harassing environment. You can create an environment that is hostile, a sexually hostile environment, without someone being motivated by a pure apparent desire. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But note city officials here means both elected and appointed officials. So, forms of harassment. As you can see, the way in which harassment can occur can take in many forms. And there are two sort of categories of overriding categories of harassment. There's the quid pro quo, which I would suspect all of you will understand, and there's the hostile work environment. So the quid pro quo means literally this for that, Latin, and is applied in the harassment context. This is where there's a sexual desire, or maybe someone would say it's not so much sex as power, but it's where submission to the conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly a term of condition of employment, in this case, in terms of dealing with a staff person, or a submission to such conduct is used as a basis for employment decisions affecting the individual, or in a broader sense, in the sense that it may implicate public officials. Submission to such conduct is used as a basis for an official's decision to cast a vote or advocate a position before the public body. This includes creating the impression that the official's vote is dependent on how the victim responds to the overtures. Some examples: I can help you move up for the right motivation. I can get you named as a lead staff person to a prestigious city city project or a committee if you go out for drinks with me after the council meeting to talk about it. I can recommend your child to a senator or representative so-and-so for that appointment to one of the military academies if you do a favor for me. These could all be examples of quid pro quo. Note that in none of these examples was there an explicit request for sexual favors. It's implied, because that's all you need. The bigger focus, I think, because I think everyone understands that quid pro quo was obviously totally inappropriate, never appropriate. Hostile work environment. This is the one where it's also never appropriate, but it's a little bit harder for people to understand sometimes. The hostile work environment form of harassment isn't necessarily tied to a particular action or inaction. Its focus is on the nature of the environment in which someone works, typically. So it's the nature of the environment can be defined by a single incident of sufficiently severe conduct, or, and this is where it gets interesting, repeated occurrences of less severe conduct. So severe conduct might involve threats, offensive touching, such as a grope or a forced kiss. Less severe conduct may involve frequent or repeatedly unwelcome sexual comments or jokes of a sexual nature, or frequent unreported unwelcome comments about a person's physical appearance. These are just examples. But, you know, constantly focusing on someone and telling them how pretty they look, or how handsome they look, or how virile they look, or whatnot, you know, repeated enough, that can create an environment that can be considered sexually hostile. And note, there was never a request for a sexual favor in those examples, or even an implied request. But that's the difference between quid pro quo and hostile work environment. So, where can harassment occur? It doesn't necessarily have to occur within these walls, okay? It could occur outside the work environment, the workplace. Strictly personal gatherings that are voluntary and consensual may be outside the purview of work-related sexual harassment. But the question is, what is a strictly personal gathering when it's initiated by someone with power over the other person, when someone superior or someone in a higher, more powerful position over the other suggests that they go out for a social gathering or meet up for a party at my house because I'm your boss and I tell you I'd like everyone to come over to my house. Is that really a consensual situation? Are you extending the workplace really into a non-workplace setting? Likewise, even if it is a purely personal situation, if what happens in those personal gatherings comes back into the workplace, then it becomes less clear. So at a party that's purely consensual, voluntary, and someone's advances are rejected, and then it carries over in the workplace where that person is snubbed for certain projects, did that become a hostile situation? Or, are we crossing over the line here? It's not just in person. As we, in the age of social media, harassment more often than not occurs through social media settings. And that's not just Facebook, Twitter, and such, but also emails, text, even the wallpaper on your computer, if it has a sexually explicit image on it, can create a hostile work environment. Hopefully no one would ever do that, but believe me, I've seen it happen. You'd be surprised what people think is okay or don't think about. But the point is the virtual nature of these electronic platforms as we've seen in other contexts, I think embolden people to say things and do, or post things, words or pictures, graphics, that they would never do in person, right? You have that sort of, you perceive that anonymity of the electronic barrier when it's not really there. The anonymity isn't there. But people do things that they would never do in person, and that's the point that you have to be conscientious of. In particular, electronic types of communications never go away, right? And they can be evidence, prima facie evidence, that it's evidence on its face of harassing behavior. And it's very difficult to refute or challenge that evidence. It's there. Unlike in person where you could say, well, I didn't say it, she said I said it, or he said I said it, well, I deny it, prove it. So in the hostile work environment setting, the hostile environment setting, the intent of the harasser is irrelevant. You don't have to intend to harass someone. It's the conduct itself and the effect of that conduct that's relevant. So excuses are not relevant. I didn't mean it, I was joking, well, she says similar stuff, or everyone says it. That doesn't fly. If the conduct itself creates the environment, the intent or the meaning behind it isn't relevant. It's what it is on its face. So, in tandem with sexual harassment are behaviors like gossiping or rumor spreading, bullying, sexual banter, and little pet names like honey and sweetie and things like that that people may call, refer to each other in a work and professional environment that isn't necessarily professional. It may not in and of itself rise to the level of harassment, but if it's pervasive enough, you can translate this into a sexually hostile work environment. And in any event, all of these types of behaviors are contrary to a culture of inclusiveness and respect, right? And that's ultimately what this is all about. So it's not good. And I think that's pretty clear that bullying behavior is never productive in a workplace. We've been talking about the impact essentially on the victim of the harassment, but the harasser has a cost. There's a cost to the harasser too, particularly in a public arena like this. In addition, I'd point out that under the Illinois Human Rights Act, you don't have to be an employer to be personally liable for sexual harassment. The Illinois Human Rights Act provides for personal liability, individual liability, to any individual engaged in sexual harassment that impacts someone's work environment. And of course, the common law provides for torts like assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress. So the harasser can be held accountable personally for that behavior as well. Even if the harasser is never sued in a court of law, the results of the investigation could be career-ending in itself. In any discussion on harassment, we have to talk about retaliation. And I'll talk about it briefly here because of time. But even if there's no merit to an underlying harassment claim, retaliation is still prohibited by both the law and the city's policies. So you can't retaliate, take action against someone because they had the audacity to claim that they were subject to harassment. Examples of retaliation include firing, demotion, denying promotion, denying choice job assignments, assigning undesirable jobs, exclusion, that is refusing to speak to someone or isolating that individual to the individual's detriment, encouraging others to shun that individual. And I'd also point out that even if the person doesn't, the harasser who's conducting, or the alleged harasser or the accused, who's engaging in the retaliatory behavior, they don't have to do it directly. They could do it through someone else. So you can whisper to, a department head, I don't want Joan having any good assignments. And if you want my support on the council, you'll make sure that she doesn't get any good assignments. We want her gone, and we want to drive her. I want to drive out of the city, and this is the way to do it. And I can't do it directly, but I'm going to do it through you. That would be retaliatory behavior. Not suggesting anyone would do that, but I would just to illustrate the point. Preventing harassment. So this is really what's more important, is how do we stop it from the work to begin with. And it starts at the top. It starts with in this case, the city's leaders. A culture, the biggest impact on the culture that allows harassment to flourish, or to conversely, to prevent harassment, starts with the leadership. And that can't be overstated. Effective harassment prevention efforts and workplace culture in which harassment is not tolerated must start and involve the highest level. This is taken from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and based on empirical studies from 2016. And that makes sense. It starts from the top. You guys have to model the behavior, and it's from top down. Top city officials appointed, elected, top down. And I'm going to finish with a word about email. So remember, your emails are FOIable, if that's a word. To the same extent as any other documents, text messages, Instagram, and other social media posts. And these types of communications can be a treasure trove for both attorneys and the media. So even if don't mean it, even if you're joking, the text doesn't have tone, it doesn't carry our irony in it. It's black and white, that's what it says, that's what people are going to look at. So that's all I have to say. And I don't know how long that took, hopefully within the time limit.
Thank you, Phil. Questions or comments from the council? Alderman Goodman.
I guess just one overarching comment, which is that I think this is a really important subject, and I'm glad we have the chance to think about it here all together and emphasize how important creating an atmosphere of inclusion and respect is, both at the council level and among all of the city staff. I agree that leadership has to come from the top. We have to set a good example, and these are subjects that people are uncomfortable talking about. So just being a little bit more comfortable talking about it, seeing people you respect, people you know, talking about it. It's okay to discuss these issues. If you're not sure if something is a problem, talk to somebody you trust. Ask. See what they think. There's no point in being silent about things that make you uncomfortable, especially in your workplace. So we really encourage our employees, our staff, the people who interact with this city to be comfortable talking about this issue. And I hope that having this conversation helps with that.
Thank you, Alderman. I would just add that I'm glad that we're doing this publicly, because I think people should understand that it is our intention to adhere to the highest standards in this area. And we've tried to do that in the past, and now that it's spelled out even more clearly, I think we'll even do better than we've done. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. You're free to work on your skills of PowerPoint. Although it worked very well, so I'm just teasing. Okay, we'll move on with the meeting. Further comments that I have this evening, several things. One, the City Council Budget Workshop will be held on Saturday, March 17th, beginning at 9 a.m. Everyone is welcome if you want to come and see how sausage is made, how we discuss the budget. It is an interesting discussion always. Again, that's Saturday, March 17th at 9 a.m. here at the City Council chambers. We have numerous volunteer advisory commission and boards that make recommendations to the City Council on a variety of issues. At times there are vacancies on these bodies, and we need motivated and committed residents to help serve them. If you are interested in volunteering, please send me a letter of interest and a resume at davidbrummel@warrenville.il.us. even if you're not sure what you might want to do, get your name in our file, and when something opens up, we can contact you and see if it might be something that's a good fit for you. We have some job openings in the city also. At Public Works, we need summer seasonal help. There are still several openings there if someone's interested in that. Police Department needs a part-time police officer as well as a crossing guard. So if you have interest in those things, you can apply online at www.warrenville.il.us, or you can call City Hall or call the Police Department and get direction from whoever answers the phone. And the last thing I have is the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. Finance Director Carl Dahlstrand and his staff again. This is the 25th year that we've received this award. We meet not only a minimum standard, we meet the best, the highest standard for financial reporting in this community. I'm very proud of that fact. There are very strict rules as to how that job is supposed to be done, and we adhere to those rules very, very well. So Kevin, thank you, and thank you your staff for 25 years of excellent reporting of our finances. That's all I have for this evening. Clerk? Treasurer? Alderman? Alderman Hoffman?
Yeah, I was just, while I was gone, I was out of town. A resident texted me a picture of a house flood in Warrenville. After, I'm not quite sure, I never heard how many inches of rain we got this particular last flood, but it seems awful odd that the county and the state have now spent millions of dollars, and we still have residents flooding when they close the gates on the dam. Sure would like to find out the reason why. Thank you.
Alderman Berry?
Excuse me. I just would like to thank the mayor for the State of the City address, which was last Wednesday evening, February 28th. It was a great presentation, and it was a little different than normal. And if you weren't able to attend, if you can please check it out. I think it's on YouTube, and it's also on Channel 10. It was very informative, and I've already had some residents come up to me this weekend and had questions about some things that were presented. So it was a great place to start some dialogue with residents. So easy to understand, and there's pictures. People, if they don't understand what he's talking about, there's pictures and explanations. So it was a very good presentation, and I would like to thank the mayor very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Wilson.
Yeah, first of all, I thought that the presentation on Wednesday night was great, Mayor. Very, very informative, and it was nice to see a new resident ask the question about how do I get more information. I thought that was very good, and your response was great. So thank you for that presentation.
Thank you.
The other thing is I would love to look out there next to us and see some dirt piled up over here, and something is happening. And the other thing is I noticed on Sunday in the Chicago Tribune, Earhart had their announcement of the new project right here in Warrenville. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was very, very nice, timely, and I hope that the wind is always at their back. Thank you.
And the snow doesn't get too deep for the next few weeks. Thank you, Alderman. Anyone else? All right, very good. City Administrator?
Nothing to add tonight, thank you.
Thank you, John. And City Attorney?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Thank you, Barb. We'll go on to the approval of the agenda for this evening then. Alderman Widener?
Motion to approve the agenda for the March 5th, 2018 City Council regular meeting.
Second.
Second by Alderman Davalos. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The agenda is approved for this evening. We have a set of minutes also that need approval. Alderman Widener?
Motion to approve the minutes of the February 20th, 2018 City Council regular meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second. Again, any discussion of those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. Thank you. The consent agenda for this evening. Item 6A, accept staff recommendation, waive second reading and pass ordinance 02018-07, validating the corrected version of ordinance number 2017-38. B, receive and file minutes of the Tourism and Arts Commission regular meeting held on January 11th, 2018. C, receive and file report of invoices paid up to February 28th, 2018 in the amount of $41,561.55. And D, authorize expenditures for invoices due on or before March 19th, 2018 in the amount of $191,023.53. Alderman Widener.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented by Mayor David Brummel.
Second.
Motion and a second. May I have a roll call, please?
Alderman Berry.
Aye.
Alderman Hoffman.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Ashour.
Aye.
Alderman Goodman.
Aye.
Alderman Widener.
Aye.
Alderman Davalos. Aye.
The consent agenda is approved. We'll move on to regular agenda this evening. Would someone like to bring that item forward? Alderman Berry?
I'd like to make a motion to accept staff recommendation and approve the FY 2019 citywide work plan project list dated February 8th, 2018 as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Okay. Alderman Goodman.
I really appreciated staff's effort of identifying areas that aligned with the strategic plan and the climate action plan as well in this list. I think it was interesting to me, however, how I guess clumpy the list was. We have a lot of items that involve the strategic plan number 4 and a fair number that involve strategic plan number 1, but it wasn't really spread out among all of the items of the strategic plan. I get why that is, I do, because, it's very easy to just list sort of in granular detail all the various infrastructure projects separately as separate items, whereas diversity, item 6, for example, there's not so much granularity there. But when you look through our strategic plan, it does, I think, fail to have sufficient implementation steps that are clear to us, that have been put together. And I think that going forward, the fact that this 2015 plan still doesn't have implementation steps, which is the part where we break down what we need to do in order to accomplish these goals that we have set for ourselves in 2015. And we're not even going to break it down into steps by fiscal year 2019, so 4 years later. I just don't understand how we've gotten to that point, how we've let that slide so long. Looking back on it, I don't even remember the first couple of years' delay on that. I look back on the amount of work that went into putting together the strategic plan and the economic development portion of our strategic plan, and how emphatic we were at the time that this was going to be a tool and going to be used by all of our staff in making our big picture decisions going forward. And to the degree that we've done that, that's great. But to not having even broken it up, I remember when we had the old version of the strategic plan, there was a project manager involved. And is it possible that at this point, that's what we need, some outside person to crack the whip a little bit and say, we need to be a little bit more organized? If our staff doesn't have the time to do this, if we don't have capacity to make this a priority after 5 years, we're looking at year 5, I guess, when we're gonna even sit down and have that action step list put together. I mean, I understand staff is busy. I understand staff has a lot of day-to-day issues. And I know I said some of this last week, 2 weeks ago, but I feel like this is not something that we can afford to push off. So that's my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Davalos.
I appreciated, as Alderman Goodman did, I appreciated the addition of the strategic plan and the climate action plan. I think it does give me at least a little structure to be thinking about this. But I also am more positive, I think, about this work plan because as I look back, let's just take the strategic plan. As I look back at the 6 steps of the strategic plan, we've done a lot. I mean, since 2015, we have, I think we have hit a lot. We have made progress in each of the 6 areas. Now, number 6 is a little more challenging, but I think we've talked about it a lot. So I sort of think this year, and I said this at previous council meetings, I think this is a very peculiar yet exciting year because of a couple of things. Because of the increased community development and infrastructure and public works that's gone into our TIF 4 area in particular. Other areas also, but just in particular what's going on out there. And that was, I think, our number 1 priority. And number 2, this ERP thing, I think, is this thing that kind of weaves through everything, changing the look of at least 2018 and into 2019. And so it's sort of sucking up a lot of perhaps projects and energy, and it's making our this work plan look a little differently than it might have looked had this been accomplished. So I really do feel, though, that the strategic plan, in my mind, and I look at it a lot, has been out there. We're accomplishing things. Have we accomplished everything? Could we do a lot more? Absolutely. But we are. I look at the public safety, for instance. I'll just pick that out, too. That is a goal that I just think leaps and bounds. We keep getting awards all over the place, and I think we can see that is a priority. And the environment, through a lot of our work and our work with the county and the Forest Preserve, is right out there. And everything we do, I think we're looking about open spaces and different things. I think Mayor Brummel announced tonight the 25th year of the financial, that we get these amazing highest possible awards for our financial planning. And I know that every person that sits up there at some level is committed to keeping us with no outside debt, to keeping our tax rate from being, we don't change that tax rate very much, and we have so many sources of income that we're not dependent just on property taxes. And I don't want to take up a whole lot of time here, but I sort of think, I mean, I'm commending staff on the strategic plan. I think the climate action plan is a little bit different animal. I'm glad it was brought up, mostly because I'm happy that it's out. Now it's kind of out there, and we all got to read it again and look at it, and some of the work plan objectives were tied to it. It is a different document than the strategic plan. It is an advisory document. It is something we should continue to read and try to implement as best we can. There are initiatives in our budget for this next year that involve solar. They haven't been voted on, but they will be discussed. I think we're trying to do a lot of things with the environment, and it just comes up and gets related to a lot of the projects that we do and the open spaces. So I personally, in conclusion, I personally am very happy with the work plan. I think it has been a huge effort of the staff, not an effort, but I appreciate their efforts in listening to us and in considering things. I think some good things have been brought up, new things I've thought about. So I am in favor of at least giving this work plan a start, knowing that the council has the power at any moment to move things around if they so choose to advise staff to do that. And but right now, I think with the ERP and the incredible work going on in TIF 4, especially with Public Works and Community Development, that that this work plan is good for the next 18 months at least, until we get this ERP done. So anyway, thank you.
For those of you who might be interested in the 6 goals that we're talking about for the strategic plan, I did address each of those in my State of the City address for 2017, and some major accomplishments and something to look forward for 2018. So if you'd like to see some discussion of those goals, some of the major initiatives that were successful and some of the ones that we're going to undertake going forward, take a few minutes and watch the State of the City address, and you'll learn a little bit about what we've done and what we're looking forward to in the near future. Anyone else? Alderman Widener.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask the city administrator if they had, if he had considered making any adjustments to the work plan alignment of priorities after going over both the strategic plan and the climate action plan.
Okay, John?
To answer that directly, no, because what we have put together, as we presented a couple of meetings now, the staff has looked at the capacity of our staff resources and the number of projects and the criteria, which is in the packet, on how we evaluated what is a 1, 2, and 3 in our recommendations. And one of the things, and to answer that further, one of the things we're asking for tonight is a final opportunity if there's changes the council wishes to see, not the final opportunity to approve it or change it, but to give us direction so at the budget workshop coming up on the 17th, our staff could meet and figure out what changes. I've said this a couple of times, it's not a simple thing of, I want to move project X, so take project Y and move it down. The more we've looked at this, and I've listened to all your questions, as has our staff across the council here. We've sat down and talked about what could we do? Are there things we can move? Did we get this right? How could we change things? Again, it's not a simple thing of moving one project down and one up, or even a couple. It's a matrix that we have to look at. Alderman Davalos and some others up here talked about the different projects and what is primarily driving this year: development and the ERP. Development, just to make it as simple as possible, takes public works and community development almost completely out of any special projects. Some of the ones that are down in priority 3 involve them. We don't have any time left in their capacity to move those around unless you take out projects that we have commitments to private developers, some other contractual arrangements, or grant obligations like a path or a trail that we've made commitments to get those in. We've talked to people, we've made commitments, we made promises, we have deadlines on grants that we could lose if we delay the Mac Road path, which is very important. For another project, we may end up losing that money because of timing and so on. You take the ERP and overlay it. We take most of my staff capacity, it's a small staff. Christina is tied up half of her time. That whole position was created originally as to handle a lot of very specific things and also do special projects, because I get too tied up in things, and that's really the extent of our staff aside from support. And finance, we have the director and the senior accountant. Half of their time each will be dedicated for more than a year just to that ERP. Given that that's been deemed to be very important to support all of our work, that just takes the capacity out. And all of these other things are excellent projects, great ideas. We want to try to get to them. As was discussed at the last meeting, there's just too limited amount of resources in terms of staff and too many great projects that we're trying to do, and this is our effort to prioritize them. Not diminishing any of the plans or processes, procedures, directions that you all have adopted. With the staff we have, we can't do that, all of it. We can't do all of it at all. We can't do all of it well. We can't even do most of it well, but we can do many of those things with the high quality you expect.
Thank you, John. Okay.
Thank you for the explanation. Again, I think it's going to be a challenge to shut down a lot of the operations in order to approach the ERP. And I just think in contract negotiations that time should be lengthened so that we have time to do some of the other things, because I keep hearing over and over again, I understand that we have a right-sized staff and that we have lots of responsibilities, but I'm not so sure that, we can shut down all our other commitments and dedicate ourselves to ERP for a year. So I don't know, I just would like to think that the staff would maybe consider that. I kept hearing at the beginning that this was the first go-around, first work plan initiated, and to kind of bear with us. And then there was this opportunity to align it with a strategic plan, which, you know, hadn't been done as part of the first time initiation of the work plan. And there was an opportunity to revise and edit and improve things. And usually when you go through things for a first time, if you're given a chance to do it again and revise and edit it, you would find things that you would do differently. And I guess I'm a little bit surprised and concerned that staff didn't go through this and find anything that could be changed. And it's not my purpose to cherry pick it or anything like that, but I did see some, you know, the priorities that were not applicable to any of the strategic plans or the climate action plans and things like that. And, you know, if I was looking at this, I think those would be ripe for adjustment. And, I heard strong favor for a couple of solar projects and also the website, you know, initiative to communicate better with our public. And I just think that those are two issues that somehow need to be addressed sooner rather than later. And the opportunity to have a priority 3 project sitting there year after year after year and be extended into as a priority 3 is there. And we may never see those all-important projects move up. And I think the council members have spoken in strong favor for those projects. And I think they're backed up by the strategic plan and the climate action plan as priorities if you looked closely at our initiatives. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Alderman Goodman.
In terms of the website redesign, I would think that it's possible that having less staff time on that project might be advantageous to our website redesign. Some of the criticisms that I've had professional web developers make of our website is that it looks like a desktop for somebody on city staff. You know, it lists everything that they need and where they can find it, but it's not necessarily comfortably put together for members of the public that are looking for information, and in particular, the mobile version. So having less staff time available might be advantageous in moving forward with a website redesign. Yes, we need to have a simpler website with less stuff on it, and yes, that would mean changing some content that's already there, which will need some staff input. But in terms of design elements, in terms of user features, in terms of, you know, friendly sizing for smaller devices, you know, those are sorts of things that the technical experts know how to do and that staff doesn't need to spend a lot of time on. The last time I was on the city website committee, I wasn't entirely happy with how that committee worked. There were, it still produced a better website than we had to begin with, so I'm not going to complain entirely. But I agree with Alderman Widener about a lot of the things that he said. And even though I think that Alderman Davalos is correct that the city staff has done an extraordinary job under the circumstances that we've given them in moving forward with the strategic plan, I think we as a council have fallen down on the job in not implementing action steps for them to follow in order to advance the strategic plan. You look at, you know, financial responsibility, and, you know, I'm not going to nitpick every choice that the staff made about what they think it's relevant to, but I think financial responsibility, item number 2, isn't on this list at all, and I can see at least 3 or 4 big items where it probably does belong in here. You know, financial responsibility is one of our, and accountability is one of our highest, it's number 2 on our goal list. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that yes, our staff does a great job on the things that they work on. Yes, their time is going to be limited going forward. But maybe this is the point where you need to learn to let go a little bit and rely on outside experts a little bit more and volunteers. You know, I'm certainly willing to volunteer being on a website committee again. So I can only speak for myself and not for other people, but I think we could find people in the community that would have opinions about that and would be giving of their time.
Alderman Davalos.
Thank you. I was just thinking about a couple other things as I'm listening to everybody. I think we're forgetting about the page 15. The only thing the city staff is doing is not just this work plan. A whole lot of things are getting accomplished on the, what are they calling this? The regular sort of job that is part of the job description of these people that is ongoing and is not extra projects, it's just what they do day to day. And a lot of those things are accomplishing and supporting our strategic plan. And so I think things maybe are going on that are not just in the 3 parts of the work plan. And as I read it through really quickly, I identified some of the strategic plan that they could be as part of implementing that plan. The other thing is, and this was explained, I think, a couple meetings ago, or at least I remember it, this is not just like we're going to do number 1, and when that's finished, we're going to do number 2, and then when that's finished, we're going to do 3. The website, the Assistant City Administrator talked about work that's already being done and why we have to work with the developer and different things. I know that the Route 56, which looks like it's a number 2, is already going to pretty much be finished pretty soon. So people are working on that. People are working on these other things. They just have to, if we're going to ask for something to be in order, you have to make an order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it doesn't mean that everybody's on 1 and then everybody's on 2. A lot of these second priority things I think people are working on. And at least that's how I'm interpreting this. It's not so much in cement as maybe in quicksand. I don't know. It moves. That's the wrong analogy. Maybe soft cement. But things move around, and everybody's multitasking with the size that our staff is. They have to multitask. So I am not unhappy with this, but I'm also looking at that 4th page about what they're already doing, and a lot of that stuff is executing that strategic plan, I know for sure. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Alderman. City Administrator.
Just wanted to make a couple of comments to clear up a few things. Across the city, all the time, we use a lot of consultants for many different types of projects, engineering assistance, staff advising. There has been the compensation plan. We use them for many, many things. IT consulting, thank you, Christina. Major thing all the time, every day. They're right here, we use them almost as quasi-employees. The planning of that is one set of work for us, a website update. And granted, we've talked about that. It is not ideal. It looks nice, but it's not really user-friendly. We have to get to that at some point. But it's the content that goes in there that is a major undertaking for staff that gets populated by our staff. It's not gonna, they can redesign it, they can set it all up, and it will be either just the existing content, which is not real helpful. I agree with that. There's some of it that's there and you can go look it up, and some of it is not really useful. That has to get updated, it has to be reevaluated, and there's some, I forgot the number, 300 and some pages, that's probably, thank you, I got that number right. Technology is something that I'm amazed, looking back at our strategic plan, we didn't include anything about it. It doesn't, I guess it kind of doesn't touch the community, and it's not really directly related to one of our departments. Economic development, it's been something we've been working on forever. We have a department dedicated to development and zoning. We have a department dedicated to finances. We have a department dedicated to infrastructure. We have a department dedicated to public safety. In hindsight, a lot of the strategic plan wraps around what we already do and do pretty well, and we set some goals and objectives, some better than others. The diversity was something we added on. It became almost a no-brainer to me. We should have that in there, and council agreed, and we put that in there. But it's something unique we have to figure out and keep working at. It's not ever going to be done. It's something you always work at. We're doing a pretty good job with the staffing. We're doing a much better job, but a pretty good job, I think. I'll speak for myself, with the community events. It's some other areas of inclusion we need to work on, and we need to partner with the council to start working on. One of the very specific objectives there is boards and commissions and elected officials that more represent the community and are more diverse. That's not an easy thing. And it's not staff can support you on it, but that's something we have to lead on. I need to ask this question. I was a little in a quandary last week or 2 weeks ago. I probably should have been a little more vocal. I did express some confusion at the beginning. The strategic plan, I understand. The council has adopted that. We certainly need to keep working on that. It is a priority, and that's the direction and the vision of the council for the foreseeable future. And in a few years, we'll have to start again and do a new process. But we have many other, you have adopted many other plans: sidewalk plan, bikeways plan, comprehensive plan, the zoning ordinance, and so on, including the climate action plan and some others. Is there a prioritization? Are they all equal? That's going to be very confusing if everything is equal with the strategic plan. We need that direction. If we're going to elevate the climate action plan, in my view, and if I'm mistaken, please so direct, we follow the direction of the city council, then we need to be paying a lot more attention to that plan. It's written up and right in the beginning, in introduction, it's recommending that it's an advisory, it's a guide for the Environmental Advisory Commission to use to help promote ideas with the city, with other governmental bodies, to educate the public, and so on. It's not a policy document. So we have not paid as much attention to that, absolutely, you're right, as we have to the strategic plan or some others. That needs to be made clear for our staff. If there are more plans that are of the same equal level, then we need to be following them. We need that from the city council. I want to address one other note on project management. It has been a great frustration of mine that we haven't made greater progress. Not to throw anybody under the bus, it's some really good efforts. Our former assistant city administrator asked that she be able to lead that whole project management and process to break down the steps that we did with the 2007 plan when we had an outside consultant. She went to training. She was getting geared up to do that. And good for her, she found another job and moved to another place. We hired a new assistant city administrator, and she took the lead on doing an RFP, RFQ. We found some consultants. We did some interviews. If you remember, it's about a year, almost a year and a half ago now. And we'd set about $30,000, $40,000 in the budget. They came in at 90 and 100 and something for the same work. We rejected those to get back to it. Now, we have not gotten back to that part. There has just been a lot of other things that have gotten in the way, and you know, if need be, shame on me that we haven't gotten further along with that, but it isn't for lack of trying. I don't want to leave here tonight with everybody thinking we just didn't bother, because the strategic plan is something we follow. It's just not something we're being able to do a performance measurement benchmarking on, because we don't have that measurement criteria. I just wanted to make sure I clarified a couple of those things. Tonight, when we can talk about these things ongoing, we're all here almost every Monday night at one meeting or another. There's a lot of things I just commented on from some of the questions that have come up. Tonight, the staff needs direction. If you want to change priorities, if there's a majority that wants to move some things, we need to know that, because I need to gather the staff. We need to sit down and figure out how to move the things around, because again, they're not just interchangeable. And it's going to, because there's a number of people involved, it may only take a few hours, but that's a few hours times 5 or 8 people on staff. I'm not sure what the projects are and what we need to do to figure that out. We need that direction. We have about a week and a half before we have to have things together for that budget presentation, and I want to make sure that we have what you want to discuss at that meeting. So I will stop talking, I promise, and hopefully we have some direction where you want us to go before there.
Alderman Ashour.
I appreciate the effort you put into the citywide work plan project list. I think that the way you've laid it out, I'm repeating some of what I said last time we talked about it, but this is a work list for our staff to coordinate and take care of projects that we've all approved, we've considered important, or they've come to us from other developers or whatever. And just because somebody's pet project isn't on tier 1 when they've just been suggested, you know, we're treating this like, if it happens to be 3 right now, that's always going to be there. These are things that are just suggested, just new items. We've got 1s and 2s that we have to accomplish this year. This group of people has to get it done. I think that the purpose of this is to focus staff on the direction to accomplish these things and then move the other things up the tier. I'm I think they looked at their workload and are just trying to organize it so they can come out with a good result as efficiently as possible, using the resources the best we have. And we can make that as difficult for them as we want to. I think the plan, the way it is just fine to start. We're going to be reviewing as we go along.
Okay, Alderman Weider?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to something the city administrator was mentioning about the different policies and procedure policies that we have. Some are focused on and others are not. And I think you were referring to the climate action plan as part of being one of those policies that you weren't sure as far as how much the city should adhere to it. And I guess, you know, my purpose in reviewing this was to align the work plan with our strategies and goals. And in our strategic action plan, one of the goal sections is open space and the environment. And I think the last bullet point on the top of page 5 of the strategic action plan talks about following the tenets and commitments in the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement adopted by the City Council. So I think if you're wondering whether or not it falls under the city's policies to follow, I think that clearly brings it under the strategic action plan's umbrella, in that it's specifically mentioned in that document that was unanimously approved by the council, if I'm not mistaken. So it should be very much a part of our documentation and our efforts as we go along. And I just think that you know, we cannot let, you know, the open space and the environment, you know, fall by the wayside and become a low priority, because I think it was, you know, very much mentioned as we brought in citizens and groups and things like that to formulate the strategic action plan, that was a focus. It's not necessarily a pet project when the whole community is asking that the city and the city fathers pay attention to these kinds of things. So those are my remarks. Thank you.
Alderman Berry?
We've discussed this for several weeks, and I've looked at it over and over again. I appreciate that the staff has included the strategic plan information. And if you look at most of the items in number 1 and number 2, they have to do with community development and public works. And the reason that I think that this plan is an outline of what it is that we need to do, and those items that are on there for public works and community development are on there as 1 and 2s because of the fact that we now are capable of having development in our community, which we were not capable of in 2008 when everything kind of fell apart. And for a number of years, we were able to get many things done, like the Earhart construction area. It took us a long time to work on that. And maybe it was a blessing in disguise that we had that time to work on it and get it ready for the development. But now we're looking at Route 59. And when I ran for alderman in 2005 for the first time when I was elected, one of the things that I talked about at that point was the development of Route 59. And it's finally now happening, how many years later? And that's why, to me, the items that are number 1 and number 2 are very important, because we have to strike while the iron is hot. And to me, those things need to be number 1 and number 2. The item number 3, electronic agenda packets, we've talked about that for years. We have many people on the city council who are not interested in that. So it's a number 3. To me, this is an outline. And if something comes up and we are capable of moving a 2 to a 1, and we have the time and the staff time to do it, we can do it. If something comes up that's a number 3 and can be moved to number 2, if the staff is capable of doing that, then we move it to number 2. But to me, I don't know if this isn't set in stone. And we, as the city council, are capable of telling the staff, we need to reconsider. We need to move something from a 2 to a 1. Or maybe we need something that's a 1 to move to a 2. But as of right now, for me, this is a good outline, and it is a good showing of what is necessary now.
Okay, Alderman Goodman.
I want to say how much I agree with what Alderman Berry said in many, many respects. I think the idea that we have time for more planning when development is not busy, and we need to focus on development when development is happening in our community is absolutely true, and has provided me with a valuable perspective on this discussion, and I really appreciate her bringing that up. I do think, however, that assuming that, as Alderman Widener said, that the first rough draft at this has to be perfect and can't possibly have any revisions, the fact that we've discussed this 6 times and we keep getting these, I'm going to say, defensive responses to every attempt to make any changes, has been a little bit surprising to me from our staff. I think when you look at most of these items, absolutely, everybody is going to agree that most of the items on item 1, or even most of the items on item 2, are very high priorities, and I don't think anyone is arguing otherwise, that we shouldn't work on constructing the important infrastructural attachments that go with the new construction that's being proposed in our town. I think that tinkering a little bit around the edges, which are some of the things that have been suggested by a couple of different aldermen, not just me, is being, I think, dismissed a little bit too easily. For example, the administration of the Private Property Drainage Assistance Program is something which this council came up with and decided was a priority and put forward and has been listed on this list as a priority because the council made it a priority. If the council didn't make it a priority, it would not be on this list. We do not have outside developer funding for that project. We do not have grants, which are contingent upon us moving forward with that quickly. Even the connection to the strategic plan that you have listed here, which is item 4, yes, it's infrastructure, but it's not city infrastructure. It's private infrastructure. It's not part of the city's public assets, which is how it's described in the strategic plan. So, the idea that absolutely every single item that's listed here on priority 2 has to do with outside grants and developer funding, I'm sorry. That's just not absolutely true. We could be having a policy discussion about whether that particular policy, setting that project as a higher priority than other items which have been indicated by this council are high priorities, which are some of the items on number 3 category on this list, isn't true. It's true in most cases. It's just not true in every single particular. So while I completely agree with most of the things that Alderman Berry just said, I still think that there are a couple of changes that could be made to make this list better. I think that the 3 things that I've talked about, the city website, although I guess tonight mostly Alderman Widener has talked about that, the strategic plan implementation steps, and the private property drainage assistance program are things which I would like to change on this list. I could see moving up one or both of the solar projects, although I think evaluation by a consultant would require less staff time and would be an easier thing to implement, to see what our solar opportunities could be in Warrenville. I don't think every single item on this list is going to be the same for the whole course of the year, but in terms of whether we're setting it in stone, we're voting for this as the staff priority. So if we say this is the staff priority and they don't make that their priority, then they're not following the direction of the council. So it is a little bit set in stone until we would make another direction to staff. And this is our opportunity to make that direction and have that conversation. Thank you.
Alderman Berry.
I guess I do have a little bit of a problem with the administration of the private property drainage assistance program, because that was something that our citizens have come forward about. And they're the ones that have made it a priority and made us understand it was a priority for them. And what I'm here to do is I'm here to listen to what those citizens have to say. And some of this, if I'm not mistaken, this drainage assistance program also has to do with the drainage that might be coming off of the not storm sewers, but sump pumps that are coming out of people's homes that are ending up on other people's property and then going into our storm sewers. And that's what's creating some of this problem that we have with the sanitary sewer and infiltration and inflow reduction program that we're talking about. Maybe that plus the fact that we're sending a little bit too much to Naperville and paying too much money. So I think that's where I thought that should be a number 2, because there's many implications just from that one item. But for me, it always had to do with the people who showed up here telling us it was an issue, that there's many other people that have called saying it's an issue, and I think that is something that we agreed to do, and we have to stick to that, especially when they show up here and tell us that. And I think that's the way I looked at that particular item.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the work program as presented. This would be, I guess, the opportunity if someone would like to make a amendment to that motion for the council to vote on. This would be the opportunity for that. I think initially when this discussion was begun, I suggested that the way to implement any changes in the work program was to have the council vote on that, and when we have a majority of the council that wants a direction, that will certainly be followed. So, does anyone want to make a specific amendment to the motion that we can vote on? Seeing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Alderman Hoffman.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Berry.
Aye.
Alderman Goodman.
Nay.
Alderman Davalos.
Aye.
Alderman Widener.
Nay.
Alderman Ashour.
Aye.
Motion carries. We have nothing under unfinished business. We have an item under new business that needs discussion, so would someone please bring that forward? Alderman Widener? No? Pardon me? Oh, okay. Alderman Berry?
I'd like to make a motion to authorize city staff to issue a request for proposals for enterprise resource planning, the ERP project management contractual services.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Who would like to lead that? John? No. Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before you is a request to allow us to issue an RFP for project management services to assist us with the ERP over the next approximately 14 months. There is going to be, as the discussion you just had, there is more than enough for staff to do. We are going to need some assistance in more or less herding the cats, if you will, to make sure that everybody is doing their portion of the ERP implementation, to make sure that the deadlines are being met, to make sure that any issues that arise between the staff and the implementer are able to be talked through, work toward a solution, and then addressed as we move ahead in that implementation. The request for proposal will allow us to seek an outside party to come in and assist us with that. The interviews we would conduct will be done in advance of the May 1 kickoff of this project. If when the budget is approved, the city council has decided that they don't want to fund this, we then would not move forward with anyone that we have interviewed as our potential project manager. Staff will need this help. There's approximately 900 hours which would be devoted to the project manager to assist us, that we simply do not have enough time as staff to address those hours. That PM would assist us with those hours, and we'd like the ability to bring interview candidates to help us do that in advance of the final approval of the budget for fiscal 19.
Okay. Questions for Kevin? Alderman Davalos.
Yes. Do you have an estimate of how long this person would be employed, do you think? Is it like 18 months or?
It would be during the length of the ERP implementation, which is approximately 14 months. We have also looked at the possibility that they may need to be on it for a little longer after that to assist with the community development piece of this puzzle as well. So we've estimated approximately another 6 months might be possible for them to be here, although that's a ways off and we're not sure on that just yet.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, we have a motion and a second. May I have a roll call, please?
Alderman Ashour,
Aye.
Alderman Goodman,
Aye.
Alderman Widener,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Berry,
Aye.
Alderman Davalos,
Aye.
Alderman Hoffman.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. We have a need for an executive session this evening. May I have the citation, please? The motion and a citation.
Okay.
Alderman Berry.
I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of 5 ILCS 120/2(c)(11), litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent.
Second.
Second by Alderman Wilson. Roll call, please.
Alderman Berry,
Aye.
Alderman Goodman,
Aye.
Alderman Widener,
Aye.
Alderman Hoffman,
Aye.
Alderman Davalos,
Aye.
Alderman Ashour,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
We will not be conducting any business after our executive session, so you're free to go about your own personal business. Thank you for your attention this evening.